Hello, and welcome back to LPBW Update, your number one source for the news and exclusive theories the main show won't dare to touch. We have a story for you today that is so shocking, so deeply disturbing. It will change the way you see the Roloff family dynamic forever. We are peeling back the curtain on a calculated campaign of manipulation that sources say nearly tore the family apart at its very foundation. This isn't just about the farm. This isn't just about divorce drama. This is about a medical nightmare, a story of calculated isolation and terrifying control. We're talking about Topic Xian, the medical gaslighting. Our investigation has uncovered a series of events suggesting Caryn Chandler systematically convinced Matt's own doctors that Amy Roloff was a dangerous, unstable presence in his life, all to seize total control during his most vulnerable moments. Before we dive into the chilling details of this exclusive report, please, if you value this kind of in-depth analysis and want to support our mission to bring you the truth, take 1 second to hit that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe to LPBW Update and ring that notification bell. You are not going to want to miss a single second of what we have uncovered. Your support helps us continue digging for the stories that matter. Now, let's get into it. To understand the sheer gravity of this situation, we have to set the scene. Our sources place these events during one of the most tumultuous periods in Matt Roloff's recent life. The farm hangs in the balance, a multi-million-dollar decision with decades of family legacy on the line. The negotiations with his sons have collapsed, creating a rift in the family that is palpable. On top of this immense emotional and financial pressure, Matt is facing a significant health crisis. We're not talking about his routine aches and pains. Our insiders describe a series of serious medical scares linked directly to stress that had his doctors genuinely concerned. His blood pressure was reportedly erratic, and he was experiencing symptoms that required constant monitoring and a slew of specialist appointments. This was a man at his absolute weakest, both physically and emotionally. He was vulnerable, exhausted, and looking for stability in a sea of chaos. And right there by his side was Caryn Chandler, positioning herself not just as his partner, but as his primary, indispensable caregiver. This is where the story takes a dark and insidious turn. According to multiple sources close to the situation, Caryn insisted on attending every single one of Matt's medical appointments. On the surface, this appeared to be the act of a loving, supportive partner. She was the one taking notes, the one asking the doctors follow-up questions, the one managing his medication schedule. She created an image of herself as the sole gatekeeper to Matt's well-being. But what was happening in the private moments, in the few minutes she would manage to get alone with the doctors and nurses while Matt was in another room for a test or a scan, is the crux of this entire alleged conspiracy. It was in these stolen moments that Caryn reportedly began to plant the seeds of a poisonous narrative. An insider, who has requested anonymity to protect their relationship with the family, described these conversations in chilling detail. Caryn wouldn't be frantic or overtly dramatic. Her approach was far more subtle and therefore far more believable. She would speak in hushed, concerned tones, a performance of a woman at her wit's end. She would say things like, "Doctor, I don't know what to do. His blood pressure, it's through the roof after he gets off the phone with Amy. He gets so agitated. I can see the physical toll it takes on him. I'm genuinely worried about her effect on his health." She allegedly framed Amy's every action, every communication as a deliberate source of stress. She painted a picture not of a co-parent and a business partner of 30 years, but of a relentless antagonist. Think about the power of that suggestion to a medical professional. A doctor's primary goal is the patient's health. They see a man in a fragile state, and his seemingly devoted caregiver is providing them with a direct, plausible cause for his recurring medical episodes. Caryn allegedly became the sole interpreter of Matt's life for his medical team. Matt, exhausted and in pain, wasn't in a position to contradict or even notice the subtle spin. He just saw Caryn fighting for his health, being his advocate. He had no idea she was allegedly building a cage around him, brick by brick, using the very people he trusted with his life. The campaign of manipulation didn't stop at vague suggestions. Our investigation has learned that Caryn began to use tangible but twisted evidence to support her claims. She would frame normal family communication as harassment. Imagine this scenario, which was described to us by a source with knowledge of the doctor's consultations. Amy sends a text to Matt. The text is about a legitimate shared family responsibility. Something like, Matt, just a reminder that the property tax bill for the north side of the farm is due next Friday. Can you confirm you've handled it? It's a simple logistical message. It's the kind of communication divorced parents and business partners have every single day. But in Caryn's hands, that text became a weapon. In the doctor's office, she would reportedly pull out her phone, or Matt's phone, and show this text to the doctor with a sigh of manufactured despair. She would say, "See, doctor, this is what I'm talking about. He just had a procedure yesterday. He's supposed to be resting." And she's hounding him about bills. It never stops. There's no respect for his recovery. She just won't let him have any peace. The stress is literally killing him. She allegedly presented a curated collection of these interactions, stripping them of all context and weaving them into a narrative of Amy as a volatile, demanding, and destabilizing force. She was reportedly telling the medical team that Amy couldn't accept that Caryn was now the one in charge of Matt's life, and that this power struggle was manifesting as a relentless campaign of stress-inducing demands on a sick man. To a doctor who only knows the Roloff family from what Caryn is telling them, this narrative is deeply concerning. They don't see the decades of shared history, the grandchildren, the complex business ties. They see a patient whose health metrics, blood pressure, heart rate, cortisol levels are genuinely alarming. And they have a primary caregiver present at every meeting, calmly and consistently pointing to one single source of that stress: Amy Roloff. It's a textbook case of gaslighting, but the victim wasn't just Matt, it was Amy, who was being systematically painted as a villain without ever being present to defend herself. The manipulation was so masterful because it was wrapped in the language of concern. Every lie was couched in the phrase, "I'm just so worried about Matt's health." This steady drip of misinformation, of curated evidence, and heartfelt concerns eventually had its intended effect. The medical team, acting on the information they believed to be true and reliable, began to see Amy as a legitimate medical risk to their patient. The breakthrough for Caryn's alleged plan came during a particularly serious consultation following a major health scare from Matt. The doctor, a well-respected cardiologist according to our sources, sat Matt down with Caryn by his side. He looked at Matt with grave seriousness and delivered the line that would detonate a bomb in the heart of the Roloff family. He said, "Matt, we've managed to stabilize you for now, but I cannot overstate the importance of managing your stress. Your numbers indicate that you are in a precarious position. We need to eliminate any and all major sources of agitation in your life right now. Based on the reports I've been getting from Caryn about your blood pressure spikes and the clear pattern of stress following interactions with your ex-wife, I am making a professional medical recommendation. For the sake of your recovery, I strongly recommend you limit contact with Amy for a while. We need to create a calm, stable environment for you to heal." Let that sink in. This wasn't a suggestion from Caryn anymore. This was a directive from a trusted medical authority, a doctor's order. For Matt, A man who has battled health issues his entire life and has a deep respect for his doctors. This was a devastating but undeniable instruction. He's being told by an expert that the mother of his children, his partner of 3 decades, is a literal threat to his life. Trusting his doctor and trusting Caryn, who was nodding along with a look of solemn agreement, Matt reluctantly agreed. He was convinced it was a necessary sacrifice for his own survival. He was isolated, vulnerable, and being told that the only way to get better was to cut Amy out. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Amy was completely shut out. Her phone calls to Matt suddenly went straight to voicemail. Her texts, once answered within hours, were met with days of silence. When she tried to coordinate logistics about the grandchildren or the farm, she received no reply. At first, she was just worried. She thought Matt's condition must have been worse than she knew. But her worries soon turned to confusion and deep, profound hurt. Finally, after days of trying to get through, she received a cold, formal email not from Matt, but from his assistant. The email, as described to us, stated that all communication regarding any family or business matters must now be directed through Caryn Chandler per doctor's orders. To ensure Matt's stress levels remained low during his critical recovery period, Amy was blindsided, devastated. Doctor's orders. What kind of doctor orders a patient to cease communication with the mother of his 4 children? It made no sense. This wasn't just about their personal relationship. This was about co-parenting, co-grandparenting, and co-managing a complex business. How could a doctor intervene in that way? This was the moment a seed of suspicion began to sprout in Amy's mind. It felt wrong. It felt controlling. It felt like Caryn. The line, all communication must now go through Caryn, was the tell. It wasn't just about limiting stress. It was about consolidating control. Caryn had now successfully positioned herself as the sole gatekeeper to Matt, effectively severing his direct line to the rest of his family and his past. Amy, reeling from this bizarre and painful situation, did what anyone would do when something feels fundamentally wrong. She sought a second opinion. She confided in a close friend, a woman we'll call Brenda, to protect her identity, who has been a registered nurse for over 20 years. Amy laid out the whole situation: Matt's health scare, Caryn's constant presence, and the shocking doctor's order to cut her off. She asked Brenda, "Is this normal? Can a doctor actually do that?" Brenda's reaction, according to our source, was one of immediate skepticism and alarm. She listened intently and then explained the professional and ethical landscape to Amy. She said that for a doctor to make such a specific, life-altering recommendation to essentially sever a primary family relationship is highly, highly unusual. It's not something a doctor would ever do lightly. She explained that it would typically only happen in extreme circumstances, such as if there were a documented, verifiable history of harassment, abuse, or a clear and present danger. A doctor wouldn't just take the word of a girlfriend, no matter how concerned she seemed. They would need more. They would need a pattern of evidence, police reports, or documented threats. For a doctor to issue that kind of advice based on reports of stressful phone calls and misinterpreted text messages was a major red flag. Brenda told Amy, doctors advise patients to reduce stress all the time. They'll say, avoid stressful situations or try not to get worked up. But to specifically name a person, your ex-wife and the mother of your children, as the single source to be cut off. That's not just unusual, Amy. That's extreme. Someone had to have been feeding that doctor a very specific, very convincing, and very one-sided story for a long, long time. This conversation was the spark that lit the fuse. Amy's hurt and confusion now had a new, sharper edge: suspicion. Brenda's professional insight confirmed Amy's gut feeling that something was deeply wrong. This wasn't a medical decision. This was a power play orchestrated with chilling precision. Amy now realized she wasn't just fighting for her relationship with Matt. She was fighting against a meticulously constructed narrative designed to erase her from his life. And she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that she had to find out exactly what Caryn had been saying to those doctors. She needed proof. She needed to see what was in Matt Roloff's medical records. The stage was now set for a reckoning as Amy prepared to uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it was, and expose the full extent of the medical gaslighting that had poisoned her family. What she would find was more damning and more explicit than she could have ever imagined. Fueled by a potent mix of righteous anger and deep-seated fear for her family, Amy knew she couldn't let this stand. The conversation with her nurse friend Brenda had crystallized everything. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a simple case of an overprotective girlfriend. This was a calculated, systematic campaign to sever her from Matt and, by extension, from the core of the family she had built over 30 years. She had to get her hands on those medical records. But how? A simple request from an ex-wife would surely be denied, and it would tip Caryn off that she was investigating. She needed leverage. She needed a legal key to unlock that door. And then she remembered. During the final painful stages of their divorce proceedings, buried in the mountain of paperwork that divided their lives, there was a specific clause she had insisted on. Her lawyer at the time thought it was unusual, perhaps even a little morbid, but Amy had been adamant. Given the unique genetic nature of Matt's dwarfism and the potential health implications for their children and grandchildren, she had fought to retain a specific, limited form of medical access. It wasn't a full medical power of attorney, but a legally binding document that granted her access to any of Matt's medical records that pertained to heritable conditions or conditions that could impact the long-term health and genetic counseling of their direct descendants. It was a clause born of a mother's foresight, a desire to always have the information needed to protect her children. At the time, it was about ensuring future generations of Roloffs had a complete family medical history. Now, it was about to become her secret weapon. Caryn, the relative newcomer, would have no knowledge of this intricate legal detail buried in the divorce decree. With a copy of the notarized document in hand, Amy took a deep breath and began the process. She didn't go in person. That was too risky. Instead, she drafted a formal, legally precise letter to the hospital's medical records department, co-signed by her attorney to add weight and legitimacy. The letter cited the specific clause in her divorce decree and formally requested copies of all notes, consultation summaries, and diagnostic reports from Matt's recent cardiology and general practice visits. She knew she was walking a tightrope. She was entitled to the records, but the reason for her request was far from the original intent of the clause. She sent the package via certified mail, and then the hardest part began, the waiting. Days turned into a week, then two. The silence was deafening. During this time, the wall around Matt grew higher and more impenetrable. Our sources describe a family in quiet turmoil. Zach and Jeremy reportedly found their calls with their father becoming shorter, more stilted. Caryn was almost always on the speakerphone, interjecting with reminders for Matt to not get worked up or keep his blood pressure down. When Zach tried to ask a direct question about the farm sale, Caryn allegedly cut in, saying, "Zach, we can't talk about this now. Your father's doctor said he needs zero stress. We can circle back on this when he's stronger." She was using the doctor's recommendation, the one she had engineered, as a shield to deflect any difficult or unwanted conversations. She had become the complete and total gatekeeper, and the family was beginning to feel the chilling effects of their father's isolation. Matt, for his part, seemed to be a ghost in his own life, placidly agreeing with Caryn, completely under the impression that she was merely enforcing the strict orders of his trusted physician. Finally, a thick, heavy manila envelope arrived at Amy's house. It was from the hospital. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at it. This was it, the moment of truth. She sat down at her kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly as she tore it open. Inside was a stack of paper nearly an inch thick. It was a dense collection of medical jargon, lab results, and appointment summaries. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed, but then she started to read the doctor's consultation notes, the narrative portion of the record where the physician documents the conversation with the patient. And there it was, in cold, clinical, black and white, was the proof of Caryn's deception. It was worse than she had even imagined. The notes were a chronological diary of Caryn's insidious campaign. Amy read in horror as the doctor's own words chronicled the lies. An entry from 2 months prior read, "Patient attended appointment with his partner, Caryn Chandler. Ms. Chandler reports the patient is under extreme stress from his ex-wife, Amy Roloff. She states his blood pressure spikes dangerously after every communication with her. She describes Ms. Roloff as unwilling to let go and a source of constant agitation." Another entry from a few weeks later was even more damning. "Ms. Chandler pulled me aside today while the patient was getting an EKG. She expressed grave concern for his health, stating his ex-wife's behavior is erratic and emotionally unstable. She presented a text message from Ms. Roloff regarding farm maintenance as evidence of what she calls relentless harassment. Per Ms. Chandler, stress is the primary obstacle to his recovery." Amy felt a wave of nausea. Erratic, unstable, harassment. These words were now part of her ex-husband's permanent medical file, presented as fact by the woman who was sleeping in his bed. The doctor had recorded Caryn's words verbatim, and then she found the kill shot, the note from the appointment where the doctor made his fateful recommendation. It read, "Patient's partner Caryn reports his blood pressure spiked to 191/15 after a 10-minute phone call with his ex-wife. She is tearfully concerned he will have a major cardiac event if the contact continues. Given the consistent reporting from his primary caregiver, Ms. Chandler, and the patient's vulnerable state, I have advised a temporary but complete cessation of contact with Ms. Roloff to create a medically necessary low-stress environment. The patient has agreed to this course of action." There it was, the entire conspiracy laid bare. Caryn hadn't just suggested it. She had created a fraudulent medical pretext. She had fed the doctor a stream of lies, exaggerated symptoms, and twisted evidence until he had no choice but to see Amy as a clear and present danger to Matt's health. Amy felt a cold, hard anger settle in her soul. This wasn't just about her hurt feelings anymore. This was a violation, a manipulation of the medical system. It was an act of profound betrayal against Matt, who was being treated like a pawn in Caryn's terrifying game of control. She now held the evidence in her hands, undeniable, documented proof, and she knew exactly what she had to do. A simple phone call to Matt wouldn't work. Caryn would intercept it, spin it, and call her a liar. Showing up at the farm alone was also too risky. Caryn would create a scene and have her thrown off the property, claiming she was harassing a sick man. No, this had to be done in a way that left no room for denial, no escape route for Caryn. It had to be done in front of the family, the very family Caryn was trying to tear apart. Amy made 4 phone calls, one to Zach, one to Jeremy, one to Molly, and one to Jacob. The message was the same, and it was laced with an urgency they couldn't ignore. There is a serious family emergency. It involves Dad's health and things you have been told about me. I need you all to meet me at my house tomorrow at noon. And you need to make sure you get Dad there, alone if possible, but get him there no matter what. It is that important. The next day, the atmosphere at Amy's house was thick with tension. Zach and Tori arrived first, then Jeremy and Audrey. They were confused, worried. Amy was a rock, calm on the surface, but radiating a steely resolve. Finally, Matt's car pulled up. He got out, looking frail, with Caryn right beside him, her hand possessively on his arm. She had a look of annoyed suspicion on her face, clearly not happy about this summons. They all gathered in the living room, an awkward, strained silence hanging in the air. Caryn immediately tried to take control. "Amy, what is this all about? Matt is supposed to be resting," his doctor said. "I know what his doctor said," Amy cut her off, her voice level and cold. "Or rather, I know what you told his doctors. He said—" She turned to Matt, her eyes locking with his. "Matt, for the past several weeks, I have been cut off from you. I was told it was on doctor's orders. I was told that I am a source of stress that is dangerous to your health. Is that what you believe?" Matt looked uncomfortable, glancing at Caryn. "Amy, the doctor just thought. With the pressure and all, it was for the best." "The doctor thought what Caryn told him to think," Amy said, her voice rising slightly with controlled passion. She walked over to the coffee table where a folder lay waiting. She opened it, revealing dozens of photocopied pages. "I was concerned, Matt. So concerned that I used our divorce decree to legally obtain copies of your medical records from the past 3 months. A flicker of genuine panic crossed Caryn's face. She opened her mouth to speak, but Amy held up her hand. "I want everyone to hear this. This is from Dr. Miller's notes, dated October 12th. She began to read. "Patient's partner, Caryn, reports the patient's ex-wife, Amy, is a source of dangerous stress. She describes Amy as erratic and emotionally unstable." She looked directly at Caryn, who was now pale as a sheet. She continued reading, her voice a steady, damning indictment. She read every quote, every fabricated blood pressure reading, every twisted account of a text message. With each word, the mood in the room shifted from confusion to shock, and then to pure fury. Zach and Jeremy stared at Caryn, their faces masks of disbelief and dawning comprehension. They were connecting the dots, the stilted phone calls, Caryn's constant interruptions, the way their father seemed to be receding from them. Matt looked as if he'd been physically struck. He sank back into the couch, his face ashen. He was looking at Caryn not with love, but with the horrified eyes of a man realizing his trusted protector was actually his jailer. Amy saved the final, most devastating page for last. She read the doctor's recommendation to cut her off and the explicit reasoning. Given the consistent reporting from his primary caregiver, Miss Chandler, she placed the papers down on the table. The silence was absolute. Every eye in the room was on Caryn. "You did this?" Zach said, his voice low and shaking with rage. "You lied to his doctors to cut our mom out of his life, to cut the U.S. out." Caryn stammered, trying to regain control. I was worried about him. You all see how she gets. I was just trying to protect him." "Protect me?" Matt finally spoke, his voice a hoarse whisper. "You used my health, my fear, to lie to my doctors. You isolated me from my family. You told them Amy was dangerous." He looked at the woman beside him as if for the first time, and the trust that had been the foundation of their relationship crumbled into dust right there in that living room. The reckoning had come. The carefully constructed world of control Caryn had built was shattered by the simple, undeniable truth in black and white. Our insider reports claim the immediate aftermath was explosive. Caryn left Amy's house in tears, but no one went after her. The family, for the first time in months, was united in their shock and their protection of Matt, who was left utterly devastated and betrayed. And this brings us to the most recent updates we've received, the kind of exclusive theory that explains so much of what we're seeing play out now. A source just last week reported seeing Matt and Amy sitting together at a coffee shop far from the farm. There was no Caryn in sight. The source described the conversation as quiet, intense, and lasting for over an hour. It wasn't a romantic reunion, but it looked like the first real, unfiltered conversation between them in years. This suggests the process of deprogramming, of untangling Caryn's web of lies has begun. The question that hangs over Roloff Farms now is a seismic one. Can Matt ever truly trust Caryn again? Has this ultimate act of betrayal shattered their relationship for good? And what does this mean for the future of the farm and the family itself? The medical gaslighting may be over, but the fallout is just beginning. We will be watching this story closely. The scene in Amy's living room wasn't just a confrontation, it was a detonation. It was the moment a carefully constructed reality, built on months of meticulous lies and psychological manipulation, was vaporized by the inescapable heat of the truth. We left off with the family, Matt, his 4 children, staring at Caryn Chandler, the woman who had not only positioned herself as Matt's caregiver, but as the architect of his isolation. The medical records spread across the coffee table like the wreckage of a crashed plane, told an undeniable story of betrayal. Caryn's attempts to frame herself as a worried protector were met with the cold, silent fury of a family that had finally seen the puppeteer behind the curtain. The reckoning had arrived. But what happens after the bomb goes off? The explosion is just the beginning. The fallout, the toxic radioactive aftermath, is where the real story unfolds. And our sources, who have been working tirelessly to piece together the events following that fateful confrontation, have painted a picture of a silent war, a shattered man, and a desperate manipulator fighting for her very survival. This is the aftermath of the medical gaslighting. To truly understand the depth of the betrayal, you have to imagine the drive back to the farm from Amy's house. Our sources describe it as the longest, most silent journey of Matt and Caryn's relationship. There was no yelling, no screaming. The explosion had already happened. This was the cold, dead vacuum that followed. Matt, sitting in the passenger seat, stared blankly out the window, the world he thought he knew now looking alien and threatening. Every loving gesture from Caryn over the past few months, every word of concern, was now replaying in his mind, but this time tainted with the horrifying filter of deceit. The woman he had trusted with his life, the woman he had allowed to stand between him and the mother of his children, had been using his own body, his own health, as a weapon against his family. The trust wasn't just broken, it was annihilated. It was a betrayal so profound it called into question every single moment of their relationship. Was any of it real, or was it all just a prelude to this grab for ultimate control? Caryn, on the other hand, was reportedly in a state of controlled panic. The manipulator's worst nightmare had come true. She had been exposed. Her power, which was rooted in her ability to control the narrative in private, was gone. The narrative was now public, documented, and in the hands of the very people she had tried to sideline. According to a source close to Caryn's circle, her mind was racing, not with remorse, but with strategy. How could she salvage this? How could she respin the narrative? Her first move, classic in its execution, would be to pivot from aggressor to victim. She knew she couldn't deny what was in the records. The evidence was irrefutable. So she would have to reframe her motives. She had to convince Matt that her lies were an act of desperate love, a flawed but well-intentioned attempt to protect him from a family that, in her view, had always caused him pain. The first major battle of this new Cold War reportedly took place that very night in the big house on the farm. Caryn, after hours of silence, allegedly launched her damage control offensive. She didn't apologize for the lies, she justified them. Our sources have pieced together the essence of her defense. She would have said things like, "Matt, you have to believe me. I did it for you, for us. I saw how they stressed you out. I saw what Amy's calls did to your blood pressure. Maybe I exaggerated a little to the doctor, but only because he wasn't taking it seriously enough. I was terrified of losing you. I had to make him understand the danger you were in. It's a masterful, if desperate, tactic. She attempts to reframe her calculated deception as an act of passionate, if misguided, protection. She paints herself as the lone warrior fighting for his health against a world that doesn't understand the pressures he's under. When Matt, armed with the cold facts from Amy's evidence, pushed back, she would have escalated to the next phase, blame shifting and attacking the messenger. "This is Amy's fault, can't you see?" she would have argued, her voice likely filled with manufactured tears. "She was never going to accept me, Matt. She was so jealous of our happiness, of my role in your life, that she illegally obtained your private medical records to drive a wedge between us. She is the manipulator here. She twisted my words, my concern, and used it to turn our entire family against me, against us." In this version of events, Caryn is the victim of a vindictive ex-wife, and Matt's own children are merely pawns in Amy's bitter game. She is asking Matt to believe that the woman who bore his children and built a life with him for 30 years is more of a threat than the woman who was caught red-handed lying to his doctors. For Matt, this was a psychological hurricane. A part of him, the part that had fallen in love with Caryn and built a new life with her, desperately wanted to believe her. It's easier to believe your world is still intact. But he couldn't ignore the evidence. The doctor's notes weren't Amy's interpretation. They were verbatim quotes. Erratic, unstable, harassment. Those were Caryn's words, documented by a medical professional. Matt was caught between the woman he loved and the undeniable truth of her actions. This, our sources say, sent him into a state of deep depression and confusion. He had been made a fool of. His own vulnerability had been used as a tool to sever his family bonds. The trust was gone, and without trust, what was left? While Matt was grappling with his shattered reality, the Roloff children were, for the first time in a long time, completely united. The revelation of Caryn's actions served as a powerful clarifying force. The fractures that had developed over the farm negotiations, the resentments and misunderstandings were suddenly put into a shocking new perspective. They realized they hadn't just been negotiating with their father. They had been unknowingly fighting a proxy war against Caryn, who was whispering in his ear, controlling the flow of information, and, as they now knew, actively working to paint them and their mother as sources of stress and instability. An insider described a family council that took place a few days after the confrontation. It was just the four siblings, Zach, Jeremy, Molly, and Jacob, meeting at a neutral location. The purpose was to form a unified strategy. They all agreed on two things. First, Caryn had to go. Her actions were unforgivable, a betrayal not just of their mother, but of their father's trust and health. Second, they had to be careful. Their father was in a fragile state. Medically, yes, but now emotionally and psychologically as well. He was a victim in this, and pressuring him too hard, giving him an ultimatum, might just drive him further into isolation. They decided on a course of quiet, steady support. They would start calling more, visiting more individually. They would slowly and carefully begin to rebuild the lines of communication that Caryn had systematically severed, providing a lifeline of genuine family connection for their father to grab onto. They were reclaiming their family, one phone call, one visit at a time. Zach and Jeremy in particular reportedly put their own farm-related grievances on the back burner. This was bigger than business. This was about saving their dad from a toxic and controlling relationship. And this leads us to a critical and exclusive new theory we have been developing here at LPBW Update based on a series of highly compelling insider reports. We've been asking the question, why? Why would Caryn go to such extreme, risky lengths? Was it just about emotional control? Was it simply the act of an insecure partner trying to eliminate the ghost of her predecessor? While those elements are certainly in play, our investigation points to a much more tangible and far more sinister motive: the farm, money, and the future. Let's connect the dots. The medical gaslighting campaign reached its peak at the exact same time that negotiations with Zach and Jeremy over the farm were collapsing. Caryn had made her position clear on the show. She did not seem enthusiastic about the boys taking over. She was often seen as the one urging Matt to consider the high market value of the property. Now, consider this exclusive theory. Caryn's campaign to isolate Matt was not just about getting rid of Amy's influence. It was a strategic business move designed to eliminate all family obstacles to her preferred outcome for the farm. Think about it. Amy, even after the divorce, remained a powerful voice of legacy. She would always advocate for keeping the farm in the family. The boys obviously wanted the farm for themselves to continue the Roloff dynasty. These three people, Amy, Zach, and Jeremy, were the primary forces pulling Matt towards a family-centric solution. They were the biggest roadblocks to Caryn's apparent goal: a clean break. Our sources theorize that Caryn's endgame was to convince Matt to sell the entire farm to an outside developer, liquidate the massive asset, and use that money to fund their retirement, primarily in Arizona, far away from the daily drama and obligations of the Roloff family in Oregon. To do that, she needed to neutralize the opposition. By painting Amy as a dangerous source of stress, she discredited the most powerful historical voice in Matt's ear. By extension, with Amy sidelined, the kids lost their biggest ally. With Matt isolated and convinced his own family was a threat to his health, he would be far more susceptible to Caryn's suggestions. Imagine her conversations with him during this period. See, Matt, dealing with the kids and Amy over this farm is literally putting you in the hospital. The stress is going to kill you. Maybe the best thing for your health, for us, is to just sell it. Get a clean break, take the money, and let's go enjoy our lives in peace in Arizona. No more stress, no more family drama. In this context, the medical gaslighting wasn't just a personal attack. It was a corporate takeover strategy. It was a calculated plot to gain total control over the single biggest financial decision of Matt Roloff's life. This theory reframes Caryn's actions from simple jealousy to a multi-million-dollar power play. The ripple effects of this discovery have spread beyond the Roloff family. We have another but fascinating report from a source within the Oregon medical community. The doctor who made the recommendation, Dr. Miller, as we've been calling him, is now potentially facing a professional review. While he was acting on information he believed to be credible, the situation raises serious ethical questions about a physician's responsibility to verify information provided by a caregiver, especially when that information leads to such a drastic course of action like severing family ties. Amy, according to this source, did not file a formal complaint, wanting to keep the matter private. However, word of the situation has allegedly circulated within the hospital system. The incident serves as a cautionary tale within the medical field about the potential for caregivers to manipulate a patient's treatment for their own ends. The doctor was, in effect, another victim of Caryn's deception. His professional judgment co-opted to serve her agenda. So where does this leave them now? Our latest updates paint a grim picture of life on Roloff Farms. The initial explosion is over, but they are now living in the crater. Sources describe Matt and Caryn as cohabitating but emotionally divorced. The intimacy and trust are gone, replaced by a tense, fragile politeness. Matt is reportedly spending more and more time alone in his workshop or taking long, solitary drives. He is a man reevaluating his entire life, and the woman at the center of it. The children have followed through on their plan. They are in constant, independent contact with their father. The wall Caryn built has been breached. They are sending a clear, unspoken message. We are here. We are your family. We are your reality. The coffee shop meeting between Matt and Amy, which we reported on earlier, was apparently the first of several. These are not secret romantic meetings. Our insiders are clear on that. Instead, they are described as debriefings. Matt is, for the first time, getting the unfiltered truth from Amy about her experiences over the past few years. He is listening, truly listening, as she recounts her side of the story on countless issues where Caryn had been the sole narrator. He is rediscovering the woman he spent 30 years with, not as a wife, but as a business partner, a co-parent, and a deeply knowledgeable source on the family's history and dynamics. He is using her as a sounding board, a truth teller, to help him recalibrate his own judgment after being so profoundly misled. This leaves Caryn in an impossible position. She is physically present on the farm, but her power is gone. She is a queen in exile, living in a castle where she is no longer trusted. Every suggestion she makes is now likely viewed through a lens of suspicion. Every word of concern is parsed for a hidden agenda. She has lost her greatest asset, Matt's blind faith. And this brings us to the ultimate question that hangs over the entire Little People, Big World saga. Can this relationship survive? Matt Roloff is faced with an unthinkable choice. He can forgive Caryn, attempting to rebuild on a foundation of lies, a decision that would likely alienate his children for good. Or he can cut his losses in the relationship and begin the painful process of extricating his life from hers, an admission that the last several years have been built on a carefully crafted illusion. What we are witnessing is a paradigm shift in the Roloff family. The power structure has been completely upended. Caryn's alleged reign of quiet control is over. The Roloff children are reasserting their role in their father's life. And Amy, the woman who was cast as the villain, has emerged as the unlikely hero, the truth teller who brought the entire conspiracy crashing down. The future of the farm, Matt's health, and his relationships are all in flux. The story is far from over. In fact, the most dramatic chapter may have only just begun. We will continue to follow every lead, every insider report, and every new development in this shocking story of medical gaslighting and family betrayal. Make sure you are subscribed to LPBW Update because you can be certain that the next revelation is just around the corner.